watching Gearz.
Hey, welcome to Gearz. You know, one of the biggest challenges that you can face on a project is when you start out with a plan or an idea and then something happens that completely blows that out of the water. You know, maybe the frame is rusted, maybe the vehicle is not what you thought it was, and now you have to reevaluate the whole project and maybe even change directions. Yeah, it's a dilemma, and it's something that we get questions about all the time. So, today we're going to address that exact scenario and show you how to make the right decisions and hopefully still come out ahead on your project. Okay, what we have here is a 1967 Jeepster convertible that I found in a garage where it had been pretty much sleeping for a couple of decades. Now, I took a quick look at the odometer and it looked like it had just a hair over 100,000 miles on it, which makes it the perfect candidate for a custom build. And that was the plan. I was going to do a motor swap and put in bigger axles and wheels and tires and do all kinds of cool Jeepy stuff to it. So I was looking at a level 3 resto mod style project until I got it back to the shop here and started looking at it closely. Looking past the cheap repaint that somebody did years ago, the old Jeep started to reveal some secrets. First of all, a quick look at the VIN tag showed it was an ultra-rare 8701 Deluxe convertible that had the factory Continental kit in back, along with the short fiberglass shelf and the non-functional tailgate, as well as the aluminum side trim. The Buick V6 engine and the Turbo 400 transmission with the console were also top options for the Jeepster in '67, as was the power top. However, it was the tightness in the original door hinges and the steering and the lack of arm and footwear on the doors and the floors that made me start to suspect that this was not the old beater that we originally thought it was. The final clue was the original wiring under the hood and the assembly marks on the firewall put on by the workers as it rolled down the assembly line in 1967. Yep, there's no doubt about it. That's not 108,000 miles on the odometer, it's 8,000 original miles on the clock. Now we got a problem. A first-year Jeepster with only 8,000 original miles on it is not only rare, but it also has the potential to be very valuable in original condition. So there's the dilemma. What do you do? Well, I always say it's ultimately your vehicle. You can do what you want with it. But to cut something like this up into a trail rig would just be crazy. So if you are bound and determined to have a trail rig out of a Jeepster, your best bet would be to sell this to a restorer, take the money that you make, buy yourself an old beat-up body, and build your trail rig. However, if you decide to keep the project, your next decision is how do you plan on restoring it? And you basically have two choices here. Number one, keep it all original. Number two, do some modifications to it that don't detract from the originality, but make it more drivable. And if you're a collector, the first way is probably the way to go. If you want to enjoy the vehicle and drive it, the second way is how you want to go. That's what we're going to do on this one. Okay, once you've assessed your project and decided what direction you're going to go with it, the next step is to decide what level of restoration you're going to do. And on this, we're going to do a level 1, get it running and driving safely. Fortunately, the old V6 seems to be relatively untouched, but somebody did add an electric fuel pump on the firewall, and there's evidence of an electrical fire with burnt and bare wires everywhere, which is a mess. And that'll all need to be fixed before we even think about putting a battery in and trying to crank this thing. So the first step is to start tearing things apart and remove anything that we're going to replace. This includes all the hoses, the alternator, the fuel pumps, the wires and the distributor, and the carburetor. Now, this is a great example of why it's a good idea to replace gaskets on a vehicle that's been sitting for a long time, even if it has low miles like this one. Look at this old gasket, how it's turned to dust. This would leak like crazy. So now's the time to fix it. Now, the last step is to pull the intake and the valve covers. And an 8,000-mile engine should have no sludge and be super clean. Look at that. That is like right out of the machine shop, and that is awesome. Can't wait to see under the intake. Oh, look at that. Oh, it's super clean. Got the cam and everything in there. Man, those ports are just perfect.
Can't get enough Gearz? Make sure to check out the Tales of a Gearhead podcast, where Stacey brings a lifetime of automotive knowledge, friendships, and expertise to the listener. Also, check out our social media channels for updates and videos of Gearz projects, as well as special contests, giveaways, and events. If you have a vehicle you want to enter into What Are You Working On, go to staceydavid.com and submit it. There's also the online store and tons of other Gearhead information that will encourage you to get out there, build something, and go drive it.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where you can see we're up to our elbows in a level 1 restoration on a 67 Jeepster that has just a hair over 8,000 miles on it. Yeah. Now, I know some of you guys are probably looking at this going, man, that is a lot of stuff. I thought a level 1 was easier than that. No, a level 1 is get it running and driving safely, which is a lot more involved than just pouring gas down it and trying to start the engine. So we're not messing with the paint, we're not doing anything with the top, the interior, no fabrication, none of that kind of stuff. That all comes in levels 2, 3, 4, and 5. A level 1 is all mechanical, so it's fuel system, electrical, cooling system, brakes, suspension, that kind of thing. So, as you can see, we pulled off everything that's old and crusty that either needs to be replaced or rebuilt, including the intake and the valve covers, so we can replace the gaskets. Of course, even on a level 1, you can expect to have some challenges in the project. For example, this original intake manifold originally used 2 studs and 2 bolts to hold the carburetor in place. But if you look closely at that stud, you see how that's rusted and tiny right there? That's just waiting to break. Fortunately, we were able to get it out without breaking it off. But the second one, not so lucky. So we eventually had to put in a helicoil so we had metal threads back into the intake. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but that little guy right there can absolutely ruin your afternoon. It's going to take all of the tools on this table just to fix that problem. Because first of all, you need to take a grinder, grind off the broken piece so everything is flat with the flange. Then take your punch down in the center of the stud, then take a drill down in the center of the broken stud, and then take your easy out, stick it down in there, and hopefully you'll be able to work the broken piece out. Now, if it comes out, you're good to go. If it doesn't, you're gonna have to drill it out and put in some new threads. Now, how do you do that? Well, you pick up a helicoil kit, and then you take a drill bit in the proper size and drill out all the nastiness. Then you take the tap that's supplied with the kit and tap the new hole. Then you take the threaded metal helicoil insert and put it down in the hole, which will then give you threads in metal where they belong. Now, this kind of surprise can absolutely drive you crazy if you're not prepared for it. But that's the point of these kind of projects, to help you solve problems so you can move on to the next levels. Okay, with everything cleaned up and painted, we are ready to start putting stuff back together. But that broken bolt should be a good reminder of not to reuse your old hardware. Look at this old stuff. That one there I thought was going to break in the head. That would have been a bad day. So there's no reason to reuse this, especially when companies like ARP have all kinds of kits to completely change all the hardware in whatever engine you're working on. And the quality is far better than what you're going to find down at the local hardware store. Now, if you're working on a project like this, especially something that's a little odd, it is extremely important that you find a company that specializes in parts for your specific vehicle. And for the Jeepster, we went to a place called Jeepster Man, because they carry everything that you can imagine for those Jeepster vehicles. But not just those. any kind of Jeeps, from Willys to Kaisers to AMCs. And the reason that that's important is that they will have every kind of option that you can do to that kind of vehicle, so you can choose how you want to put it together. Whether you do an original restoration or slapping a V8 in it, they'll be able to help you. Let me show you what I'm talking about. For the carburetor, you can take your original carburetor, buy yourself a rebuild kit, and rebuild your original carburetor. If you don't want to do that, you can buy a completely rebuilt carburetor from Jeepster Man and just bolt it on. If you don't want to do that, maybe you want something a little more performance-oriented, you can jump up to this Weber two-barrel conversion. Now this bolts right in place of those Rochesters and even has its own special air cleaner. So out of the three, this is the route that we're going to go. But we will keep our original carburetor just in case we ever want to take it back original, which I'm sure we won't. Now, just because this is a bolt-on carburetor does not mean it's a bolt-on deal. Check this out. You're going to need all these extra parts. You're going to need another throttle cable. You're going to need a fuel filter. You're going to need a fuel pressure regulator and all kinds of hoses and fittings to make this fit. So bear that in mind when you're doing this kind of conversion. The fuel tank is also something that you shouldn't overlook because they were prone to rust and problems even back in the day. So rather than mess with an old rusty tank, we got a replacement tank from Jeepster Man that's designed to bolt right in place of that original tank. Now it comes with the filler neck and the vent tubes and the hardware and the brackets, everything that you're going to need to bolt it in. A replacement tank is one of the best investments you can make on an older vehicle. Okay, with the fuel system laid out and going together, we're one step closer to driving this thing down the road.
If you like cars, if you like coffee, you're gonna love Gearz coffee cars. Because in each pack, you'll find a special blend of rich, robust coffee to get your blood pumping, as well as a collectible cartoon sticker and matching photo card of some of the wildest vehicles Stacey has built or featured over the years. Collect the whole series and be sure to keep an eye out for the ultra-rare Strange Brew card that are added to random packages to keep things interesting. It's Gearz coffee cars, the best bean on the car scene.
Hey, welcome to Gearz, where we have a 67 Jeepster convertible in the shop. We've got it torn apart and we're doing some upgrades on it. Now, if you're not familiar with this project, let me bring you up to speed on it. I basically found this thing sitting in a garage where it had been for decades, and my original plan was to do a motor swap, axle swap, a bunch of cool off-road stuff. So we're talking like a level 3 or level 4 resto mod or frame off build. And then we dug a little deeper and found out that this was a first-year, super rare survivor with only 8,000 original miles on it. Yeah! So that is too rare, too valuable, and just too cool to cut up into a trail rig. There's plenty of rusty commandos out there for that. A much better approach on this kind of vehicle is a level 1 or level 2 restoration. So we are in the middle of a level 1 restoration, which involves get it running and driving safely. And the first thing we did was basically disassemble everything under the hood and clean it up. This involved painting the motor in the original Buick green using some engine paint from POR. And then we also replaced the valve cover gaskets, intake gaskets, thermostat gasket to prevent any leaks, and replaced some hoses. Then we bolted in a new fuel pump and took care of some problems down there. And then finally, we upgraded from this old Rochester two-barrel to a far superior Weber two-barrel setup. And that brings us up to where we are today. I've got a whole table of parts here from the Jeepster Man, who specializes in original and upgrade parts for all kinds of early Jeep vehicles. So let's get to work, starting with the engine electrical system. Now, obviously, we could just bolt in this old points distributor, but we're not going to do that because we're going to upgrade to this big HEI distributor. Now, there's several reasons for that. First of all, this gets rid of the points. Second of all, it has a much hotter spark. And third, it puts the coil right on top, so it's all in one nice little package. Now, as you can see, There is a considerable size difference in these two distributors, but they've designed this in such a way that this distributor will actually fit in that Oddfire V6 and clear everything. Just barely, but it will clear. To install a distributor, set the #1 cylinder on top dead center of the compression stroke. Then slide the distributor in place. Make sure that it seats all the way down so it engages the oil pump. Once it's seated, the rotor should be pointing at the #1 spark plug. The next piece is the alternator, and just like the distributor, we could reuse this old original alternator, but remember, there was a fire under the hood of this vehicle, so you know this thing is toasted. Also, it was a 5-wire hookup, man. That is a pain in the butt. So we're not going to use that. We're going to upgrade to a GM style 1-wire alternator. Now look at that big boy. Now, in spite of the size difference, this will actually bolt right in place of this original alternator. It's going to give us way more power, and it is a single wire hookup. This is one of the best upgrades that you can do to any vehicle to simplify your wiring and get you the power you need. Now, you're probably wondering where I got all of these nice new brackets here. I didn't. That's the original brackets, just cleaned up and painted with a coat of Rust-Oleum paint. I did the same thing with the valve covers, the thermostat housing, the fan, all of this stuff. As you can see, you don't have to spend a lot of money when you're doing a project like this. Just take the time to clean things up and detail it, because when you start putting it all back together, this makes a huge difference. The last electrical component to upgrade is the wiring harness. Now, as you can see, this original harness is a mess. Not only was it burnt, but if you look closely, you can see that somebody used an old extension cord to wire something up, which is just crazy. No wonder there was a fire under here. So when you have something this bad, you can't fix it. You just need to cut it all out and replace it, which is what we're going to do with this 21 circuit customizable harness from Painless. Now, this is a universal kit, and it's going to do several things for us. Number one, it's going to give us a real fuse block, which the original Jeepster did not have. Also, you can see it's got wiring that runs under the hood, in the interior to the back of the vehicle, so that's all laid out for you. And it's 21 circuits, so you can add other accessories and all that other stuff if you want to. The best part, though, is you've got all of these instructions to wire up all of these accessories we're putting in. There's your HEI distributor. It'll have instructions in here for the 1-wire alternator, because remember, we're getting rid of all of this stuff, voltage regulators, ballast resistors, all of this, and putting on new things. So we need to be able to wire that up. This is one of the best upgrades you can do for this kind of a project. Now, obviously, this needs to go on after all the components are on. So we're going to set this aside for now and move on to the next upgrade, and that is the cooling system. Now, you have a couple of options here. You can always try your luck with the original radiator. But if the vehicle's been sitting for a long time, you probably want to upgrade it, which is what we're going to do with this all aluminum radiator from Champion. Now, this is a 3-row high-performance radiator that is designed to bolt right in place of that stock radiator. So that's awesome. But we're not just going to do this. We're also going to add a fiberglass fan shroud to make sure the air is pulled through the radiator properly. So you should be using a shroud whether you're keeping the original radiator or not. This will take care of any cooling problems. Hey, welcome back to Gearz and our Jeepster Convertible project, where we're showing you some of the best upgrades that you can do to a vehicle to make it a reliable driver without losing the originality or the value. Now, we're pretty much done under the hood here. Got the fuel system upgraded, the cooling system upgraded, the electrical upgraded. Now we're ready to turn our attention to the suspension and the brakes, because keep in mind, the goal of a level 1 project is to make it a reliable driver that you can drive anywhere that you want, anytime. And as you can see, this thing is a little tired. It needs some help. Fortunately, there's a whole bunch of parts from Jeepster Man over there on the table that's going to take care of these problems. Now, the brakes on any old Jeep were questionable at best, so we're going to fix all that with this front disc brake conversion for the old Jeeps. Now look at this. It includes these massive 12.25-inch rotors. You get the brackets to bolt on the calipers and all the hardware you're going to need to give you front disc brakes. Now the rear brakes, we're going to keep the stock brakes, but we're going to rebuild all of the original drums using all new hardware. And then we also stepped up to these 2-inch spacers that's going to widen out the track of that Jeep and fill out those wheel wells better. For suspension, we picked up a 2-inch lift kit because that's as high as you can go on these early Jeepsters that have that early Ross-style steering. Now it includes new leaf springs front and rear, shackles, U-bolts, and even new shocks. Now what this is going to do is stiffen up the suspension considerably. It's going to raise it up, and it's going to get rid of that saggy butt look that we got going back here. Now obviously we need to get this thing in the air, get the wheels off, so we can get to work. Okay, the first thing we need to do is take things apart, starting with the locking hubs. Next comes the hub and drum assembly. Now these will need to be separated because we want to reuse the hub, but not the drum. Next, remove the 6 bolts holding the backing plate on and remove the whole brake assembly and put it in the swap meet pile. While you're cleaning things up, make sure you take the time to look for any worn parts because now is the time to replace them. All right, after some much needed cleanup, you can start putting things back together. So on goes the caliper bracket using the supplied spindle bolts, followed by the old hub with newly packed bearings, and then the locking hub assembly. Next comes that massive rotor, and finally the new caliper and the brake hose. And that's it. That's how simple it is to put disc brakes on the front of an old classic Jeep. Pretty awesome, huh? Yeah. Now, a couple of things. While you're deep in here, now's the time to check your steering linkage, your drag links, your tie rod ends. If they're bad, replace them. If your U-joints are bad, replace them. Change the differential fluid. Fix any leaks because you know you're going to need to. Another thing. Disc brakes work great if they're power assisted. Now remember, this Jeep came with the powered brake option, but that old booster shot and so was the master cylinder. So we're going to replace it with that new one from Jeepster Man so we can get the full benefit out of those disc brakes. Hey, welcome back to Gearz and our Level 1 restoration of a 1967 Jeepster Convertible. Now, if you're wondering what a Level 1 is, that involves getting something up and running and driving safely and reliably. So it's all mechanical, which makes it much simpler, much easier than like a Level 3 resto mod or a Level 4 and 5 ground-up frame-off build. And a Level 1 is the first sort of project that everybody should tackle because you got to understand this stuff before you can move on to a more advanced project. Now, so far, we've done upgrades on the electrical system, the cooling system, the fuel system, the brakes. Now we're moving on to suspension, and we're going to put on this 2-inch lift that we showed you earlier. To replace leaf springs, you'll need to put a jack under the axle for support, and then unbolt the old springs and shocks and toss them in the scrap heap. Then install the new shackles and springs using the original brackets. and the new U-bolts. Follow that up with the shocks. In the rear, it's the same thing. Pull off the old single leaf springs and shocks and replace them with the new multi-leaf springs and gas shocks. It's also a good time to put on our wheel spacers. This is going to widen out the stance and make those original wheels fit the wheel well better. They're also necessary to get a 15-inch wheel to clear those new front disc brakes. Okay, while you're under here, now is a good time to check and see if there's anything else you need to repair. Now, keep in mind, we're going to replace this fuel tank, so that's good. But look at this. There's dirt dauber nests all over the back of the rear end and down the frame, so that'll all need to be cleaned up. Also, as you can see, there's some leaks in the rear end, so we'll have to take care of that. And then if you look forward, there's some leaks in the transmission and the transfer case, so we got to fix those. And then if you look to your right, we found some rust holes in the rockers, which is to be expected, but we're not going to do anything with those right now because that is a level 2, and we'll talk about that later. All right, let's get this thing down on the ground, see what we have. Okay, with the original tires back on, you can see what a difference this lift makes on this whole Jeepster. It's finally sitting level for probably the first time in 40 years. And now we've got room to put up to a 30-inch tall tire. Yeah. Now you got options here. You can do the original hubcap thing, or you can put a custom wheel on. Anything that you want to do. And options are a good thing with any project. Welcome to Gearz. You know, a while back we rolled a rare 8,000-mile original Jeepster into the shop to do some upgrades on it. And in spite of some obvious wiring damage, some questionable restoration techniques, the old Jeep was in really good shape. So good, in fact, that we decided that all the Jeep really needed was just a level 1 style restoration. Now, some of you guys might be looking at that going, okay, so what exactly is a level 1 restoration? Well, obviously it's the simplest type of restoration that you can do, and the goal is to get the vehicle running and driving safely and reliably. And those are the two key words, safe and reliable. It's not just to get the vehicle running, drive it down the road and hope you make it back. No, that's just getting the vehicle running. A level 1 restoration is to make sure it's safe and reliable so you can drive it anytime you want. So that means you have to address the fuel system, the brakes, the electrical, the cooling system, and of course the wheels and tires. And speaking of wheels and tires, you might be wondering, what happened to those original wheels and hubcaps? Oh, they're around here somewhere. But this is where personal preference comes in. Kind of like putting on a 2-inch lift as opposed to just keeping everything stock. I much more prefer the wider, more aggressive look of a traditional 4x4. And these Mickey Thompson 17x9 Classic 3 rims are perfect for this because they not only clear those front disc brakes, but you also don't have to use the spacers like you would with those original wheels and tires. These have the right look and they're a better setup. To finish it off, we wrapped those wheels with 265/65/17 Baja Boss all-terrain tires to give us not only attitude, but traction if we venture off-road. The best part is, the original wheels will bolt right back on if we ever want to go back to that look. Now, at this point, you're pretty much done. I mean, you have a mechanically sound vehicle that you can enjoy anytime that you want. You can stop right here. This is why level 1 projects are so popular. However, if you want to still turn some wrenches on this thing, you can take it to a level 2. Now, what is that? Well, a level 2 is a cosmetic and mechanical restoration, which is obviously more involved than just getting it running and driving. Here are some aspects of a level 2. First up is the engine and drivetrain. Now, a level 2, just like a level 1, is going to utilize the same original type engine. Now, you can hot rod it, you can modify it, you could rebuild it, you can drop another one in like we did on the Scrambler. As long as it's still a version of what originally came in the vehicle, that's still a level 2 project. However, if you want to put a modern LS or some other kind of crazy engine in your project, that becomes a level 3 resto mod like we're doing on the Camaro. A level 4 is anytime you pull the body off the frame like we did on this 40 Chevy. And of course, a level 5 is the custom build, which adds design and engineering into the mix, like we did on the Cheetah, the V8 Interceptor, or Sergeant Rock. Now, obviously, each one of these levels require different tools, different workspace, different skill levels, and that's the point of this system. It keeps you on track, and it keeps you on budget, and hopefully you don't get discouraged and give up on your project. Okay, enough of that. Back to our level 2 on the Jeepster. Now, so far we've taken care of almost all the mechanical aspects of this. Now we're going to move on to the cosmetics. Hey, welcome back to Gearz and our 67 Jeepster project that we have officially turned into a level 2 restoration project, which means it's a mechanical and cosmetic restoration. Now, the cosmetic aspect of one of these kind of projects usually breaks down into 3 components: the interior and top, the weather stripping in the windows, and the body work and paint. So for now, we're going to deal with the interior, see what we got. The first step is to clean up the carpet and check the floor panels for rust and damage. And as usual, the evidence of mice and other crawly things is everywhere. So spend some time cleaning things up because you don't want to be rolling around in this stuff. Okay, with the carpet all cleaned up, the next thing to assess, if you have a convertible, is that thing right there, the convertible top. Now obviously, if it's all torn up, then you have no choice but to just rip all the stuff off and get it out of the way so you can work. But if there is any chance that you can reuse this, well, obviously you want to clean it up, try to protect it so you can roll it down and get it out of the way. So let's see what we got here. The old top material is definitely stiff and dirty, but it's not brittle or cracking, so that's good. A few of the snaps have pulled out, which is typical, but there's no rips or damage or signs of extreme wear, so this is worth saving. We'll start by cleaning up the back window to get rid of the grit and the haze. After that, we'll scrub down the top with an all-purpose vinyl cleaner from Mother's to get rid of any dirt or trash that can damage the top or window when it's folded up. Then we'll follow that with a vinyl protectant to treat the material and keep it as soft and supple as possible. All right, the top is clean and looking so much better. Now we need to try to make this thing work. And this is where you're probably going to find some surprises. Like this creative wiring that somebody did by cutting up an old extension cord to get power to the top. Man, this is craziness. And probably what caused the burn wiring under the hood. It's also a great example of why you not only need to be able to troubleshoot and fix what came from the factory, but also what somebody may have hacked up over the years. So, bypassing all the junk, we know we need direct power from the battery to the relays coming in here. And then we need power from the top switch to the relays here and here. This is what changes the direction of the pump and makes the top go up and down. Now, these wires appear to be in pretty good shape. So, we will pull out the old switch, which is obviously broken, and we'll wire in a new switch for testing. Next, we'll pull the power wire off the ignition that feeds the top switch and connect it to the battery, along with a power lead that runs directly to the relays to power the pump motor. Finally, we'll ground the motor to the battery and keep our fingers crossed that the motor and the relays are still in good shape and haven't been burned up by extension cord Eddie. Now, if you've never messed with a convertible top before, you may not realize how big of a victory this is. Now, if you can't get your top to work, it's all right. You can bypass the hydraulics and drop the top manually. But the fact that we got this thing to work means we don't have to look for pumps and cylinders and all those other things that are involved with restoring a convertible top. So that's going to save us a ton of time and money on this project. Now, obviously, it's going to have to be rewired properly when you get to the wiring aspect of your project, not just bypass like we did, but at least for now, this allows us to raise and lower the top to give us total access to this interior. Hey, welcome back to Gearz and our 67 Jeepster project. Obviously, we have the top operational, and as you can see, step back and look at this. This has got to be one of the coolest body styles that Jeep ever made. With its longer wheelbase like the CJ8 Scrambler, man, it's hard to believe that these were not more popular back in the day. But that's what makes them collectible now. All right, with the top taken care of, now we move on to the next step, and that is seat upholstery and carpet. And this brings up the pivotal question that comes up with any project. Are the seats, the upholstery, the carpet, the door panels, sun visors, are they in good enough shape for you to restore and use for another couple years, or are they completely shot and need to be replaced? Now, the reason I say this is a pivotal question, because the way you answer this can add potentially hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars to your restoration project that you might not be ready to do. So, you got to choose wisely here. Here's what I recommend. If you plan on driving the vehicle and the components are in decent shape, try to make your upholstery, your carpet, your top, those kind of things, last as long as possible. If they're faded or worn, there's all kinds of products and paints available to help bring them back to life. And it's a whole lot cheaper than replacing them. This way, you can enjoy the vehicle for a while and save up some money. Then, when you're ready and everything is completely worn out, you can replace it all. It does not all have to be done right now. For example, if you'll remember, the carpet is old and faded and it has a funky smell to it, so it needs to be replaced. The seat upholstery, on the other hand, is definitely restorable. So we went to Jeepster Man, got some small stuff. We got some door handles, we have a plastic insert for the glove box, we have sun visors, we have things to restore the console and the gauges, but we also got bigger things like a carpet set. And that includes all of the sound deadening for every part of the Jeep and the carpet. Now look, this is not just a couple pieces of carpet. These are sewn pieces for the wheel wells and the back area. Look at this. And you have the area that goes back behind the seats. Then you have the area where your feet are as the driver. Look at this. Now the thing that you really want to look at here, notice that all of these cuts are all stitched and finished. Look at that. So you don't have a bunch of frayed edges sitting out there. Everything is also marked for your shifters, your seats, everything. This is a really nice carpet set. Okay, the first part of any interior rehash is to get things off the floor. So we're gonna unbolt these seats and console and get them out of the way. Part of the fun of restoring an old vehicle is finding old add-ons and modifications, like this underseat heater and this cup holder. And if you like them, keep them. If not, get rid of them. Under the rear seat, we found some indication of why there was a funky smell inside here. Some poop and nuts. The seat belts also need to come off, and if the bolts break off or twist out, that's a good indication that you have rusty floors. Fortunately, ours came right out. Now these original seat belts, these are hard to find, so we're going to set those aside to be cleaned up and restored. The console is the next thing to come out, and it's a pretty simple removal, but When we lifted it out, it revealed one of the biggest mouse nests I'd ever seen in an old car. This is almost too big to suck up in a vacuum cleaner. Almost. The last thing to pull off are the rear side panels, and those will also be set aside for restoration. Now, once you have your side panels out of the way, this gives you a chance to really look over your convertible top mechanism. Now, even though we have it working, you want to be on the lookout for missing bolts like this right here, or any kind of leaks. As you can see, we've got some leaks going on here. You can't just leave that. Now is the time to fix it. Okay, with the floor cleared, we can finally pull up the old carpet and sound deadener. Now this sounds easy, but that's not always the case. Somebody obviously used some glue to hold this down. Hey, welcome back to Gearz and our interior rehash of this old '67 Jeepster convertible. Now, as you can see, we have the sound deadening in place, we've got the rear carpet areas in, and it's making a huge difference, not only in the way it looks, but in the way it smells in here. No longer do we have that nasty overtone of old mouse pee. That's all outside in that nasty pile. Now, anytime that you find a mouse nest like we did, make sure you check your floors, because that can contribute to rusty floors. Fortunately, as you saw, our floors checked out good, so now we're moving on. All right, anytime that you install a direct fit carpet like this, that does not mean that it's going to just drop in place and fit perfect. As you can see, there's no holes for the shifters, there's nothing for the seat mounts, nothing like that. That's up to you to cut those. So there is a little bit of trimming that you're going to have to do. So grab your scissors and your razor knife. Let's get busy. Okay, with the floor carpet in, that brings up the seats. And the vinyl on the seats is actually in pretty good shape. It's just really dirty. So we'll get to work with a heavy-duty cleaner, see if we can bring them back to life. We'll follow that up with the console, and a simple cleaning did wonders for this as well. However, there are some places that the paint is starting to flake off, so eventually this is going to have to be repainted. Now, as you can see, doing a combination of cleanup and restoration has not only done wonders for the way this interior looks, but it's also kept the cost down too. Now, obviously, there's still a lot to do. I have to do the door panels, have to do these rear panels, there's the dash, there's the steering wheel, there's a bunch of other things, and we're out of time right now. But once I get all of this finished, we're going to have an interior that we can take anywhere and use however we want. Now, is it perfect? No. Is it going to win car shows? Probably not. But that's not the point. You will have a ball taking this to those car shows, or to the store, or to the lake, and not thinking a thing about it. It's kind of hard to do that with a show car. And that's the magic of a level 2 style project. Sometimes you can work on it and enjoy it and not spend a fortune all at the same time if you follow a plan and choose what you replace wisely. Are you tired of the crap that you're facing at work? Do you ever wish you could just grow out your hair, become a janitor, and drive a junky car? Well, now you can with the Dirt for a Day package from Dirty Bird Productions. Now, this not only includes the actual Joe Dirt Daytona from the movie with the custom steering wheel, the gas pedal, and the rich Corinthian seat covers, but you also get a complete line of accessories stolen from the set, like the movie script, director's chair, janitor's clothes, and the mullet wig, so you can create your own Joe Dirt adventures and tick off all of your Ford and Chevy friends at the same time.
Hey, Kelderman, what are you doing, man?
But wait, there's more. If you act now, we'll throw in a Dirty Bird matching Super Bird for free. That's right. The Dirty Bird is an exact replica of the Dirt Daytona, except it's a bird. So it not only embodies the Dirt persona, but it also literally allows you to flip the bird to anyone who's watching simply by turning the car around. The best part is they won't even know you're doing it, making it perfect for work, weddings, and other social events that you really didn't want to go to anyway. So if you've ever wanted to be dirt for a day, now you can with the Dirty Bird combo. But you need to act fast. Quantities are limited, and when they're gone, they're gone. David Spade, Dennis Miller, and Jamie Presley sold separately. Hey, welcome to Gearz and our next installment on the old Jeepster project. Now, the cool thing about this project, this is something virtually any gearhead can relate to, because we found an old '67 Jeepster convertible that had been sitting neglected for years. And then we started with a simple level 1 restoration, which involves just getting it running and driving safely. So that covers the engine, the brakes, the wiring, the suspension, the fuel system, etc. So now we're going to the next logical step and bumping this thing up to a level 2, and that is the mechanical and cosmetic restoration. This is where you start to make the vehicle look good and make it more pleasurable to drive. So this includes paint, bodywork, interior, glass, weather stripping, wiring, mechanical. It's pretty much everything. So the first thing we did was clean up the top and get it working. Then we pulled out the seats and console. We sucked up the mouse hotel and got rid of the old carpet. Then we cleaned up the floor. Then we laid in some new sound deadener and carpet. Cleaned up the seats. And restored the door panels and console. Now, the key to any restoration project is knowing what to replace and what to keep. Obviously, our carpet was shot, so we replaced that, but our seat upholstery and our top were still in good shape, so we just cleaned those up. Also, remember how faded these side panels were? Well, come to find out, the carpet was still good. It was just faded. So instead of hunting down matching carpet and recarpeting all these side panels, we just took some fabric dye and we re-dyed the color back into those panels. And as you can see, it looks awesome. Perfect for something that you're going to drive and enjoy. Now, if we were building a show vehicle, I would have replaced that carpet, but I would have also replaced the seat upholstery and the top. So it's important to remember what you're doing. We're going to talk about that more later on. All right, with the interior looking good, today we're going to move on to paint and body. And this is where most people's projects seriously go south, because the big question is always, do I leave it like it is, or do I completely repaint the vehicle? And one of those decisions is pretty cheap. The other can be very expensive and time-consuming, depending on how far you go with it. But they both fall within the realm of a level 2 project. So today we're going to walk you through that minefield and hopefully help you make the right decision for your project. Okay, the first thing that you should have decided when you started your project is, what exactly is the goal here? I mean, are you building a race car? Are you building a show car? You building a daily driver, a beater, a rat rod? I mean, what is it? This is important. Don't overlook this, because there's an old saying, the nicer the nice, the higher the price. And there's a lot of truth to that. So every decision that you make on your vehicle needs to be weighed against what your ultimate goal is. For example, the goal here on the Jeepster is to have a nice, reliable driver that we can drive right now, but has moderate upgrades that don't take away from the originality, but it's still on a reasonable budget. Okay, with those in mind, now let's take a look at paint. Based off the overspray under the hood, this Jeep has been repainted before. The paint is faded and has its typical dings and scratches, but it's in reasonably good shape. There are the typical waves down the body that you find on old Jeeps, and mild door misalignment is also common. The latches, badges, and hinges all show typical pitting, and there are some small rust holes starting in the lower tailgate. Surprisingly, the usual problem areas like wheel wells and fenders are solid and show no signs of rust. However, the lower rocker panels not only have a few rust bubbles forming, but also show evidence of some questionable repair work where somebody riveted in a patch panel. So here's what we have. An average paint job done many years ago that's showing signs of wear. But it's in good enough shape that it could be buffed out and look presentable. The dilemma is that those rockers are going to need to be replaced eventually, and that is major surgery. Then once you replace those rockers, you're going to need to repaint the vehicle. Of course, we've already seen this has been repainted once, so the body is going to need to be stripped before you can paint it. Then if you're thinking, I'll just go ahead and pull the body off, bang, you just went to a level 4 restoration. And we've shown you what's involved in that. And just like that, a project can totally get out of hand. And it happens all the time. So the question is, do you have to replace those rockers now? And this goes back to what your goal is for the project. Obviously, if you're building a show vehicle, yeah, you have to replace those rockers and repaint the vehicle. But if you're building a nice driver like we are, no, you don't have to replace those rockers now. You can buff out the paint, get a nice rust preventative paint on those rockers and the other rusty areas and get that rust stopped, and then enjoy the vehicle for a few years until you are ready and your budget allows. Then you can pull it in the garage, take it apart, fix the rockers, paint it, and get it back out on the road. That's the approach we're taking on this one. Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where we are about to start buffing the paint on this old Jeep to see if we can bring it back to life. Now, obviously, you're going to want to have your top and your windows up before you buff a vehicle so you don't get a bunch of compound all over your new interior. Also, you want to have as many hinges and trim and badges off as possible because it's going to be a lot easier to maneuver that buffer around. This is where having a nice set of trim tools is going to come in handy. For the Jeep, most of the badges and headlight bezels and latches are available reproduction from the Jeepster man. So we're going to replace all of those, and Low Car has some really cool steering wheels and adapters for Jeeps, so we're going to upgrade that as well. All right, with the body clean of dust and dirt, we're ready to start. Now, if you have never buffed paint before, you're going to find it's very similar to the sanding process. You start with a more aggressive grit, and you work your way up to a finer grit. As you can see, I've got several buffs laid out here, from the more aggressive cutting wool buff to the finer polishing buff. And I've got a couple of compounds as well, a more aggressive cutting compound and a polishing compound. And the trick is to find the right combination. Sometimes it's a two-step process. Now keep in mind, our paint is faded and it's oxidized, but it's not completely dead. So we're going to start with the medium buff and the more aggressive compound. We're going to do a small panel and see how we like it, and we'll go from there. Now keep in mind, this is not perfect paint, so we're not looking for that. What we're looking is to make this look as nice as it possibly can. And keep in mind also, anytime you buff paint, you're actually removing paint. So be conservative in the choice of your buffs and your compounds, or you might end up looking at primer. All right, that takes care of compounds and pads. Now what about the buffer? That should be simple, right? Just grab one and go. No, it's not quite that easy. Look at this. These two are actually polishers. They feature a dual action head on them that not only orbits like this, but also freely spins. And they're designed so that you don't burn through your paint, and they'll bring a nice polish out. But they do not cut and they do not remove swirls and scratch marks. For that, you need more of a traditional buffer like this. This is heavy, single action. Listen to the torque in that motor. These things are powerful, and they always are adjustable from 1,000 RPM up to about 5,000, so you can dial in the speed you want this thing to rotate. Now this is a grinder. But in spite of the fact it looks like the other tools, and it has the same arbor, so you could actually fit a buff on one of these things, you don't want to ever get this close to your paint because you'll melt right through it and you'll destroy it. So it's important that you're using the right tool here. Hey, welcome back, where we are in the process of seeing if we can bring this old paint back to life. Now, why would you want to do something like this? Well, because buffing your paint is only going to cost you some materials and time. A complete paint job, on the other hand, is going to be thousands of dollars and a lot of time. So yeah, there's a lot of incentive to try to salvage your old paint. Now, as you can see, we've already buffed most of the vehicle and it's looking good, but that was the easy part. Now we're to the part that's always bad on a vehicle, the hoods and the roofs, because that's where the most sun damage happens. Now, obviously, we have a convertible here, so we don't have to worry about a top, but we do have to worry about the hood. So let me show you what the problem is and what we're trying to achieve here. Now, this panel has already been buffed, and as you can see, there is a very clear reflection of my hand in that paint, and that's what you want. But as you come up to this area on the cowl, notice that the reflection completely disappears, so we just have a shadow there. And you also have all kinds of oxidation and dead paint and scratches and watermarks, all kinds of stuff. So that all needs to be buffed off to bring that gloss back. Okay, with your pad damp, put some compound on the pad and you're ready to go to work. Now, you're going to want to use a slower speed here, about 1,000 RPM, 1,500, and work small areas and use a moderate pressure, because what you're doing here is cutting. You just slowly work the process and let the compound do the work. Now, after a while, start to lighten your pressure a little bit. What this does is it allows the compound to go from a cutting compound to a polishing compound. You should start to see some shine start to come up here. What you don't want to do, you don't want to let the pad get dry, and you want to buff this stuff until you feel the shine coming out. Slowly lighten your pressure, lighten your pressure. Now you're just letting the buffer go and do some polishing on it. And just before it dries, stop. Now, once you've buffed out a small area, stop and take a look at it. If you're still seeing scratches and hazes, you need to go to a more aggressive compound or a more aggressive buff. If it's looking good, continue to buff out the rest of the vehicle. Any place you can't reach with a buffer, that's going to need to be done by hand. Now, once again, starting out with moderate pressure to cut and then lightening up as you buff to bring out the gloss. Okay, once your buffing is done, you're ready to move on to your final polish and your wax. Now, obviously, you can put this on by hand, but it would also be the perfect time to move on to the polisher. Either one will give you a great result. The polisher is just going to save you some time. Okay, once the paint is buffed and polished, we'll finish it up by putting on the new trim and the badges. Okay, one final thing that you're going to have to address on a nice driver is the rubber and weather stripping. because it's almost always bad on an old vehicle. And as you can see, Jeepster Man has pretty much every piece of rubber and weather stripping, not only for the Jeepster vehicles, but pretty much any classic Jeep. And this includes door and window weather stripping, windshield, and all those little trim pieces that are impossible to find. Now, while we're talking about replacement parts, it's also a good idea, if you can afford it, to pick up any replacement parts that you might need down the road. For example, remember, this thing is going to need rockers eventually. Well, here is a replacement set of rockers. We'll just set those aside until we're ready to put them in. Also, if you think you're going to need floor pans, there they are, cross members, anything that you think you might need, now's the time to get it, because these parts might not always be available. Also, they're a great investment. If you ever go to sell the vehicle and you tell people you have replacement sheet metal, that's going to add value to the deal. And that is it. Now what we have here is a great example of a moderate level 2 style restoration that we can drive anytime, anywhere, and enjoy it. It's not going to take forever to do, and it's not going to break the bank. Also, these kind of projects are coming out of barns and garages all across the nation. So you have no excuse not to find yourself a project and start wrenching on it. Okay, so we're taking the old Jeepster for the maiden voyage. Keep in mind we did a level 1, level 2 restoration on this, get it running and driving. So right now we're just seeing how well it's going to run and drive. And so far it's doing really well. Have not gotten out on the street, the main drag yet. Speedometer's working, that's nice. Put a new cable on it. All the gauges are working, that's nice. That's kind of a rarity in these old Jeeps. It took a lot of work to get all those gauges working. What little gauges it has. So now we're pulling out into traffic. Fortunately, there's no cars coming. Here we go. Oh, motor sounds great. Okay. Oh, it's going real well. I'll need to true up the steering wheel. It's off just a hair. Front end probably needs to be aligned. Now, all in all, this is a 1967 Jeep, so it feels like a leaf-sprung Jeep. But with the sway bar on the front and the stiffer springs in the lift, this thing, I mean, we're tooling right down the road. You don't usually do that with the CJ5. So this is very good. And it easily has enough power to run freeway speeds. The brakes are working good. Probably could stand to bleed those brakes again. A little bit of sponge to them. Turn signals are working, yeah. And we just got waved at by the Jeep guys. We're gonna get a lot of waves in this thing. All right, let's see what we can do here. Oh yeah. Well, I tell you what, this little thing just kind of zips around. This is awesome. I do miss a V8. And as a typical Jeep, you see how many times I'm turning this steering wheel? These things, this is that old Ross steering. He used that back in World War II, man. So all in all, we got a great rig here. You can drive this thing anytime, have fun with it, put the top down. It's running down the road, need a little more tune-up. Should be ready to go.